you hear like an echo in your head? There's a strange vibration rising out from the heart of America, America. Listen to the sound of the drum calling players to the game of the new world order. Don't be caught unaware when the heads start rolling. No, it couldn't happen here. I know it wouldn't happen here. But I will not submit to authority of man. I'm alive, I'm awake. This is more than I can take. If you had an open door, would you kill a little more? Listen to the cries of the dead in the wake of the Sudan. Is there no one out there? I see blood in the sands of despair in Africa. Listen to the sound of applause in a chamber full of men selling out their people as they plan their assault on the heart of America. No, it couldn't happen here. I know it never happened here. I will not submit to authority of man. I'm alive, I'm awake. This is more than I can take.
And good evening once again, everybody. This is Chuck Horton along with Drew Lamb. We're coming to you live from our own kind of state of Jefferson. It's kind of a place where people are free. We're free thinkers. And we're bringing you another edition of Double Crossed Radio. It's the radio program that talks about individual liberty, economics, history, health, and anything else that's interesting to us. And tonight we're going to talk about someone it's their 216th birthday today. And we're going to talk about that person. But first we have a return of a special guest. Is he ready, Drew?
Miner Dave, I am trying to get him to confirm. So, Miner Dave, I know you're listening, so message me in Skype, mute up your mic, and I will bring you in.
Okay.
Also, we might have Gary Lake on. I'm going to send him a message right now to give us an update on what's going on with the Coquille Casino that is proposed to open in Medford. And I really wanted to get Gary on at some point to talk about this because, you and I are pro property rights, so of course we think that people should be able to do whatever they want with property that they own. But things get a little murky when you start dealing with tribal issues and casinos and who has the right to open a casino where and so on and so forth. And this is a topic that Gary is absolutely expert in. And I think that those of us, especially libertarians, need to hear his sorry to interrupt you, Joe. Yeah.
I'm just going to say before we have Gary on, I'm going to state my opinion, and then I'm going to state it afterward to see if he changes my mind any. But if there were no laws prohibiting any citizen from opening a casino, there would not be a casino there because it would not ever be profitable enough for people to run. I mean,
right.
You'd have so many casinos that they would always be on the verge of bankruptcy. It's only the protection of government that gives you kind of a semi-exclusive monopoly that makes it a profitable business. And trust me, I just bought a business that operates under this manner, and it's very profitable. But it wouldn't be if every Tom, Dick, and Harry had a liquor store.
Well, yeah, that, and there's this, system that's been created, and it's not a good system, and the way that it's being used right now is bad for everybody.
Right,
this is not a good situation. It's not good for the people of Jackson County, who are going to be footing the bill for a lot of this stuff. It's not good for the Shasta people who are completely being infringed upon. We're actually on Shasta lands, and
Yes.
and
And if I could bring up one other thing, I'm Mr. Interruption tonight. I think.
no
I
worries.
apologize.
It's
I
okay.
apologize. The subject of our program tonight deals directly with this issue because this person whose birthday this is his 216th birthday, he was very much a mercantilist. And this is a system of mercantilism, which is kind of a forerunner of fascism. This is exactly how mercantilists operated. They'd give exclusive rights to somebody to operate monopoly type businesses. And so I
Wow.
think that,
Mute
I
up.
think that
Whoa,
I think
I'm
Gary
good.
will be
If-
he will probably be bringing a lot of good information to my ears. I think on this subject, and it'll probably connect very well with our topic tonight.
So I just messaged him, and if I see him in Skype, I will patch
Yeah.
him in.
I hope he's
And,
listening.
and so
But if
Minor
yes,
Dave, Minor Dave Everest is connected. So you could bring him in when you're ready.
okay, well, I'm ready, Dave, to hear what your update is.
Yes, my update is I have a .org in the UK as a Twin Cedar Mining District, and it's not up on Google. Google search won't necessarily find it yet until it gets the index published into Google. It's right now published into a browser from Europe with Bing, and I've got it published in WebCrawler, which all the search engines go through when they scan it. So when the index comes up, I have 5 websites that are all .orgs. I don't know. I can't explain how I created them, but I can tell you Google, Facebook, and LinkedIn all helped me get them. And I owe a great debt of gratitude to the people that have donated all their time, help, and things, because things are coming together. Because I created a .org in England, I can now use England representatives in the UN, and I can approach the UN and the UN for them not following the 1791 treaty with England, and I can now be a stakeholder in the UN as the only true stakeholder. I can exclude all the environmental groups, and the UN has to sit down here and listen to me, and then they have to follow the grant because it's international law, because the treaty of 1781 says you will honor all grants. And when they granted and disposed of the mineral estate and gave it to the people of the United States by declaring you so desire to become a citizen of the United States and a citizen of your community and be productive, you could file on a claim, and it was without any encumbrances as a mining district. Well, here in the United States, I can't incorporate as a .org, because if I did, I'd be an organization. I wouldn't be a government. Well, in England, I'm not an English citizen, so I can't be in their government, which I would be if I was with a mining district, because over there, you can be an organization as well as in the government, because they run theirs differently than we do. So they gave me, I got these .orgs set up by the empowerment of the UK to empower we the people. Then I have another website there called Keeper of the Republic, my legal defense fund. You can go there, watch the film. You can go to my TwinCedarMiningDistrict.com here, and you can make a tax-deductible donation to my legal defense fund, and you can get a tax credit. Now, I'm not a CPA, so I would advise you, before making a donation and expecting a tax donation, talk to your CPA, one that's familiar with international organizations. Now, here in the they're recognizing me they can't recognize me as a government yet because of, England can't, because they recognize in the law that I am a government, but they can't come out in public and say that yet. Not until we go through some hoops on trying to get them to honor the grant, because we have to. I can go this route. And my attorney, my court-appointed attorney, has agreed to take my criminal case that I lost in the Ninth Circuit to the Supreme Court. And today I had an interview with a guy named John from the American Mining Rights Association on Facebook, which I'm a member of. As far as Facebook goes, they're out of Washington. Interview me for legal support from the Mining Association. He didn't promise me anything. He said that was up to the president and the committee. He was just investigating it to see if it would be worth their time to put resources to it. I would ask, they're a public forum. Anybody can go there and join, as long as you're in for property rights and mining rights. I think you have to be approved. I'm not sure. I was accepted in right away. I just said I joined, and they came back instantaneously and said yes. So I don't know how long it'll take you to get approved. I know you have to be approved, but by the committee, because that's the way they do it. But any of the members that are out there, I would ask you, that people that know my case and know me and know where I stand, know what I did for every miner, because I was the one that went to jail, so you won't have to. And then, so I'm using the tools that the international and national, by treaty, by our laws, that I can use. Then they might not be quite kosher if used the wrong way, because they could be used to hurt somebody really bad. And I gave to you, Drew, my map of my network. I would like you to post it. I'm very large. I have a big reach. You should see what I did for, look on my profile, Drew, and look at KMED and what I did for them. The last 3 months, they've had 5 million hits on their TuneIn app, and they have a reach of 7 million. And that's on the internet. I haven't gotten the numbers for UCY yet, but they're coming, because I have 1.2 terabytes of data on every fraud, everything, every criminal, every porno site, every child molester. I just can't afford to pay for it, and I don't have the computer to download it into. But I have a fraud algorithm. I wrote the cipher, and Google wrote the code. It's on my network. Honest people don't have anything to worry about, because it doesn't seek private information. It only seeks public information of fraud. So you have nothing to worry there.
So Dave, what do you have to do to get a .gov website?
I have to sue, and I'm not ready to do that yet.
Yeah, so what do you have to do to get us up to about 1 million listeners a day, every Thursday?
Well, I can't explain that in the time we got for the show, but I can tell you, if you and Drew and Jules take a meeting with me, I can tell you how to do it.
Okay.
Because Jules is close. She's not quite there. But that's because she's got a lot on her plate, and she's handling a lot of your guys' stuff. I could help you guys a lot. You just need to do some things that I can't tell you over the airwaves. Okay. It's proprietary. And you have to join something. You have to become an experimentalist, like I did.
Okay.
It's a school.
Well, Dave, thanks for the update, and let us know when you've got updates on your case. And
something on from John in about a week, whether they're going to help my case. They're going to talk to my lawyer. They're going to talk to Kirby Jackson. By the way, guys should get Kirby Jackson on. He is the guy to talk to. And he's friends on my Facebook. If you want, I'll send him a message about you guys doing a show.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Dave.
All right.
And that was miner Dave Everest of the Twin Cedar Mining District, regular on Double Cross Radio.
Yeah, and he's just an all-around good guy too.
All right, Dave, we'll catch up with you in the chat. Thanks for coming on.
I want to go back on and hear what you guys got in the show. Thank you.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
That was actually pretty interesting stuff. It's kind of like curiosity peaked. But back to the content of our show tonight.
Today's Abraham Lincoln's birthday.
Yeah, 216th. He'd be 216 years old if he had lived. So,
well, unfortunately, he did not. So.
Or fortunately. There's a lot of I don't know. It seems like there are contradictions about Abraham Lincoln, and one of it is just the fact that at the time when he was conceived, America was the freest place on the earth by far, and it continued to be so for quite a while during his early life. But once he reached adulthood, it seemed that his life, in fact, his reason for existence, became the eradication of that freedom for a new, better system, a system where things were they were well planned by elite masters. Have we heard this before? We have heard this before. He was he was mentored by Henry Clay, and he was a follower of Clay's works. And Clay was devoted to what he called the American system, which was basically a rerun of the mercantilism that 30 years prior to the birth of Lincoln, they had fought this bloody civil war with Great Britain to free themselves from that tyranny of mercantilism, which was how the English system ran. We'll talk about the mercantilism in a little bit, but I think the best way for you to visualize how it works and why it doesn't work very well is to visualize Nazi Germany. The mercantilism is not very far away from fascism. It's very similar. In fact, a lot of the things about it are so much the same. And you would want to describe one as the other at times. But on with other things. About Lincoln, Murray Rothbard once spoke of him as, and this is a quote, he was a master politician, which means he was a consummate conniver, a manipulator, a liar. And so that kind of sums up the true Lincoln. He was not a hero that's made out to, if you have children in school and they probably learned today that today was the celebration of his birthday. It should be a sad day for America, the day that he was born, because he was not a good thing for America. He was responsible for the death of over 750,000 Americans, excuse me. I forgot the 1,000. He was not a good person. Between the time he was born and the time he was elected as president, there was a speech given by he's a really awesome senator from South Carolina, John C. Calhoun. He was an early proponent for states' rights, and he feared the establishment of a central government. This is a quote from a speech he gave. Stripped of all its covering, the naked question is whether ours is a federal or consolidated government, a constitutional or an absolute one, a government resting solidly on the basis of sovereignty of the states or on the unrestrained will of the majority, a form of government, as in all other unlimited ones, in which injustice, violence, and force must ultimately prevail. Isn't that the truth? That's what we're looking at right now. Injustice, violence, and force. That's how things run today. Well, now some of you might be out there saying, "What are you doing ragging on Lincoln? Are you a racist?" No, I'm not a racist. But Lincoln was. And you say, how could that be? He freed the slaves. Well, he really technically didn't. It was a war strategy move to create chaos in the South. Any slaves that were held in the North were not freed by the Emancipation Proclamation. It was only in the states that had seceded from the Union that slaves were, quote unquote, freed. And even then, because of their secession, which was legal, that his proclamation had no legal weight. So when he was first elected to office, this was not as a president, but he was first elected to the House of Representatives. He said that he had no intention of doing anything about slavery. In his first inaugural address as president, he announced, "I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so." So this is part of the contradiction that is Lincoln. He talks a good game, but he doesn't walk the talk. He never did in his whole life. He's just a slick politician, lawyer, and he makes our current President Obama seem like a saint. Trust me. Now, what was the United States like during this time? It certainly was not the social climate we have today. It was quite a bit different. But in his writing on Democracy in America, de Tocqueville wrote that, this is a quote, "The prejudice of race appears to be stronger in the states that have abolished slavery than in those where it still exists. And nowhere is it so intolerant as in those states where servitude has never been known." Now, I'd like you to compare that statement of somebody who was a foreigner visiting the United States and making unbiased observations on how life was in the United States, and he's writing on slavery. He says, "The prejudice of race appears to be stronger in the states that have abolished slavery than in those where it still exists, and nowhere is it so intolerant as in those states where servitude has never been known." That seems to be quite a bit different than the propaganda we get on TV and even in our public schools or private schools. This is not the picture they give of pre-Civil War America. They see the South as a bunch of drunken people that ride around and shoot and whip the slaves, and I imagine some of that went on. I'm not going to say it didn't. I'm not going to say that they were angels in the South, but it was much worse in the North than it was in the South. And it was worse. The places where it was the worst are the places that had never allowed slavery in the first place. So just consider that as you watch these shows that show people being abducted. There was a recent movie out. It was a pretty good movie, actually, and I think a lot of it was historically accurate. But it shows him being taken from, he was a socialite in Boston. He ends up, he was kidnapped and sold as a slave into the South, in the deep South, and he was abused by several owners and finally was able to get his freedom in court. I don't remember the name of the movie, but it was a pretty good show. But it certainly wasn't, it made you feel like that was how it was everywhere across the South, and it really was not even close to the case. You can look at the Quentin Tarantino movie that came out, starring, was it Will Smith? No. It wasn't Will Smith. It was the one where they had all the shooting. I wasn't prepared for this. This is
with all the shooting?
Yeah, with all the there's like a lot of those now, but this was some Untamed. Something Untamed.
Was that Django Untamed?
Django Untamed. There you go.
Was that I don't know. I haven't seen.
Yeah, and it was all his shooting. All his movies have a lot of shooting in them. the portrayal of the South in there was that the people in the North were cultured, and the people in the South pretended to be cultured, but they were just barbarians. And I don't think that the North had any moral superiority, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. The South was just as equally corrupt, and the North was equally corrupt with the South, and they were maybe more overt about it and less tolerant because they had not lived with Negroes, so they had even less tolerance for them than the people in the South who had lived with them and saw that they were just people and recognized them.
You're using vernacular of the day.
Yes.
Actually, as far as the South is concerned, or the North, excuse me, after reading Lysander Spooner take on this in No Treason, we talked about this a few weeks ago. It was somewhat like an American company having an interest in a Chinese company that uses child slave labor to produce iPhones. It was a lot like that, and there were corporatists in the North that worked to see to it that there wasn't abolition, and it boiled down to profits, and so things the relationship spoiled when some of these business owners in the South were talking about secession, pushing for secession. So the investors from the North, saw that there was a position where they could gain monopolies. If they could destroy the South, they could get control of their businesses, and so that was a lot of what happened there. It was just crony capitalism, business as usual.
Yeah. And let's see, I lost my place here. So I guess the question, if you're looking at kind of how society was at that period and point in time in history, you come up, this question should arise in your mind. So why did we fight a civil war? It's a civil war where 600,000 American soldiers, that's either North or South, died. An additional 150 to 300,000 civilians, and we don't know how many there were and those were mostly Southern citizens. Very few citizens in the North died. And they were, General Sheridan and General Sherman were just, they were criminals. They were murderers. And their armies they would shell cities that were just full of women and children, of old people, too old to move without assistance. And they would just destroy all these cities and kill hundreds of thousands of people. They would leave, if they didn't kill them, they just leave them to die to starvation and to disease and whatever. They would go through the countryside, burning their crops, eating all the animals, burning the crops, leaving them nothing for to subsist on. What they did in the Shenandoah Valley was just atrocious. If the South had prevailed and won, Lincoln, Sheridan, and Sherman would have hung as war criminals, and no one would have shed a tear. And history would just show them for the villains that they were, and they met a just end. These people were horrible people. They saw no value in human life. They saw no value in liberty and freedom and the ability to lead the life that you want to lead. And they violated their own constitution, which kind of implicitly suggests that these states formed. The states formed of their own free will and were able to leave at any time because they were not bound. There was not some superior force that conquered them and forced them into this union. They had done it voluntarily, and they were able to withdraw their consent at any time. In fact, many northern states had threatened to do so in the early part of the 19th century because they didn't want to have to pay for the War of 1812, which was thought of as a war to protect Southern interests. So people understood that this was a right of any state in the Union to secede. So that this whole thing about keeping the Union whole and a house divided between itself cannot stand, all that stuff's just literary bullshit. If Lincoln was good at one thing, it was baffling people with the bullshit. He really never ever spoke the truth. He was a liar, and so you had to get that to your mind first. He was a liar. He's told people what he thought they wanted to hear, what he really believed with regards to the black people. And I have it here, a quote from him. And in that time of history, that point in history, blacks were referred to as Negroes. So that's why I'm using that term. And this is supposed to be on page 17, and I don't find it there. Go back. Okay, it's on page 11. I look like a 7, I guess, earlier. He was having a debate with Senator Stephen Douglas in 1858. And this was his answer to one of Douglas's charges. I have no purpose to introduce political and social equality between the white and black races. There is a physical difference between the two, which, in my judgment, will probably forever forbid their living together upon the footing of perfect equality. And inasmuch as it becomes a necessity that there must be a difference, I, as well as Judge Douglas, am in favor of the race to which I belong having the superior position. I have never said anything to the contrary. So he thought that he was racially superior to blacks, and that was
wow, what an asshole.
Yes, he was. He was pretty much. If you want, if someone ever tells you that by being a Lincoln hater and agreeing that the South had a right to secede, that you're a racist, you should just read him that quote. That's a real racist talking right there. Lincoln is often hailed as a champion of the dictum in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal. However, not all Lincoln scholars agree on this. Some have even mocked the idea that Lincoln was upholding the equality principle in the Declaration. Ebony magazine editor Lenore Bennett Jr. disagrees with the standard interpretation. He says that on at least 14 occasions between 1854 and 1860, that was when he was elected, Lincoln said unambiguously that he believed the Negro race was inferior to the white race. So I mean, there's a lot of documentation to this. Don't believe the crap you learn in public schools. It's just crap. And one of the guys I work with is he was born in Florida, so he's from the South, and he heard me talking about this last week and this week because this was going to be the topic of the show tonight, because today is Lincoln's birthday, and I just think it's abhorrent that we celebrate it, and we even have a national holiday in February called President's Day, where we put George Washington, who truly was a great man, alongside Abraham Lincoln, who was not anybody should be celebrating. And
how come the mail was delivered today?
Well, because it's President's Day is next Monday. They can't have it on a date, because then it would fall in the middle of the week sometimes, and we couldn't have a 3-day weekend.
Oh, I see. Right.
And it would not be as good a shopping day for consumers.
Okay.
So it's by having a 3-day weekend, you can have a President's Day sale and have it extend over Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, and you can just it's like almost like Christmas time again for 4 days. That's
awesome.
Yeah, so we can just keep buying stuff we don't need, and wasting dollars that are created out of thin air, which is probably as good a use for them as there is anything, I guess.
I'll be working on President's Day, I promise.
Me too. Anyway, I tell you these things. I'm trying to bring him down to the level of just a mere mortal. Lincoln was no god. He was no special person. There are lots of people out there, conservative and liberal, who believe that Lincoln was such a god. They believe the crap that they're told in the religion of Lincoln in school, and all that is true. And I tell you, there are people out there who have lost their careers as historians because they dared to tell the truth about Lincoln. And this is serious stuff. This is not just, laughing matter. A lot of the material that I got for what we're saying tonight has come from a book, and we've referenced this book before on the show, by Tom DiLorenzo. It's called The Real Lincoln, and he wrote a sequel to this called Lincoln Unmasked. And I would recommend both those books to all of you listening to this podcast. They're just fabulous. He didn't go out there and just talk a lot about his opinions about Lincoln. He goes out and he gathers information that he would take newspaper clippings from the newspapers of the day, what real people who had real jobs as newspaper editors would write in the editorials, and he took that as evidence for how the public opinion was. And he took quotes out of speeches that Lincoln really said as evidence for his beliefs on race and equality. His big solution to the slave problem, which he called a slave problem, and it wasn't a slave problem because of slaves, it was a slave's problem because of the color of their skin. Truly, that was how he felt. But he said the solution to this problem is to ship them back where they came. To ship them back to their land, their native land, where they belong. He didn't want them in America. And because it was too expensive to go there, he decided, well, some of them can be were actually came to here via Haiti, so we'll just ship them there. So they started actually, and that was I don't know if it was Haiti then exactly. It was Port-au-Prince was a city, but I think it was one country on that island, and they split it after they shipped all those slaves into this one area, into Haiti and Santo Domingo, or the other half of the island is a different country. This is all stuff that Lincoln did. He was definitely a racist. He was so prejudiced against blacks. It's just incredulous that anybody could be convinced that he believed that emancipating slaves was a humanitarian act. It was, for him, it was just a war decision. And this is kind of bringing this in to show you that he didn't really emancipate any slaves. His emancipation had no legal impact because the states had legally seceded. So they had no. It's like us telling people in Mexico they are free; they do not have to pay taxes anymore, or whatever. What impact or what weight of law would somebody from a foreign country have on just making a decree upon the people of the United States? There's none. Well, by seceding, they were no longer part of the American. They were a confederation of southern states, and it was different. It was a different country. So, anyway, so why did we fight this Civil War? Everywhere else in the world where slavery ended, it ended peacefully, and it not only ended peacefully, it ended probably without very much cost at all. I'm trying to look up a table that was in this book. Okay, that's page 50, it says. Okay. All these countries ended their slavery before we did, and it cost them nothing. So it wasn't like it wasn't an idea that hadn't been out there on the table before. So I'm going to read this list to you. Argentina, 1813. Colombia, 1814. Chile, 1823. Central America, I don't know what they mean by Central America, but I think it's probably Honduras. 1824. Mexico, 1829. Bolivia, 1831. Uruguay, 1842. French and Danish colonies, 1848. That would be mostly in the Caribbean. Ecuador, 1851. Peru, 1854. Venezuela, 1854. Every single one of those countries ended their slavery without violence. I would say there is a kind of an exception to that. The Venezuelan liberation, it was kind of a ruse to hide some criminal lowlifes that wanted to take over the government. They were using that as a ruse, but they were put down, and then slavery was still ended. So it was not much of a violence. There was a little tiny bit, though. In the war between the states, or in the South, as they call it, the War of Northern Aggression, that war cost, in those days, dollars, not in today's dollars, $6.6 billion and the lives of over 750,000 people. That was a huge cost. And there is no way you can justify saying that cost exceeds the cost of buying the freedom for those people that were enslaved. If I think somebody did a calculation on this, I don't know I can't remember the guy's name, but he said that just the northern states' share of that war, which is about equal to what they spent in the South, the North's share was enough to buy the freedom of every slave in the United States, give them 40 acres and a mule. And but we decided to fight a war instead. Now, some of you people out there who are really crack historians, you might say, the South started it, they fired on Fort Sumter. And that, while it's true, is not really accurate. The South had informed the North that they were no longer permitted to collect tariffs in Charleston Harbor, where they had the fort. The North, trying to goad the South into action, sent a ship there to force incoming vessels to pay tariffs on the goods that they were bringing in. They had the fort, they had the ship, so they had them in crossfires. They pretty much had to pay. The South was really upset about it, and they fired about they lobbed 5 shells into the fort. They didn't hurt anybody, kill anybody, or destroy any property. They just landed and exploded whatever and threw up some rocks and dirt in the air. And that was the shelling of Fort Sumter that cost 750,000 people their lives and cost $6.6 billion, which in today's dollars would be about over $6 trillion, today's money. More than we've spent on the wars in the Middle East. So I'm hoping you're kind of getting the flavor of this a little bit. Excuse me, that should have been about 3 trillion. I'm sorry. I'm just doing that in my head. I forgot what I was multiplying. But anyway, it's still a lot of money. So I'm hoping you're getting the idea here that this war was entirely unnecessary. And it certainly slavery wasn't the reason. No matter how much they'll tell you that, abolition, there were 6 people running for president when Lincoln was, 4 people running for president when Lincoln was elected. And 3 of them were one of them was an abolitionist and three of them weren't. The abolitionist got about, so would get all the abolitionists vote. He got less than 10% of the vote. So don't let him tell you that abolitionism was a really potent force, because it was not. It was probably really prevalent in a few communities where people like Lysander Spooner, who really were, he was an abolitionist that wasn't welcome in the abolitionist movement because he was also very much anti-Constitution and
he was pro-secession.
Yes, he was pro-secession, so he was kind of an enigma to them, but he was actually very consistent.
Actually, he's just like we are.
Yes, and he was very consistent in his moral philosophy. A lot of the abolitionists weren't. They advocated violence and force, and not all of them, but some of them. And so that was kind of what they were supposedly against, because that's what slavery is. It's violence and force. That's what taxation is, violence and force. It's whatever. Anyway, Lincoln was a mercantilist. We talked about that earlier. And that's the very system that the Revolutionary War was fought over, was mercantilism. It wasn't that they didn't, that if there's no taxation without representation. As clever of a phrase as that was, that really wasn't what it was about. It was about the fact they were being taxed at all. And what was done with that? What was that tax money used for? That tax money was used to restrict their freedom, to give privilege to people who were cronies of the government. They put tariffs on everyday goods that people had to buy from Europe because they were prohibited from being too big of a manufacturing base. They couldn't have any industry. England saw that they should be a raw material producer, so they had to buy all their finished goods from England. There were tariffs on that, so they could pay for the enforcement of the other laws they were enforcing on them. And it was really basically they were treating the whole colonies, except for the few privileged people who were there. But most of the rest of the people were treated much like the slaves were treated. they were forced to, to work to survive, and they were just taxed every way they turned. And it wasn't a huge amount of tax because they realized if they taxed them too much, people would get upset and they would revolt. Well, when it got to about 3% of their income or whatever, they got upset and revolted. Well, and we're thinking, wow, and these guys are a little sensitive to taxes. We're getting taxed upwards of, some people in this country at the top are getting taxed maybe about 50% of what they make. And that's, if you take a look at a pro athlete that gets maybe $100 million a year, he's probably taken home, because of all the different ways he gets taxed by different states and cities where he plays, because he's considered to have earned his income in that city. Now they maybe get 30% of what they are quote unquote earning that year. The rest of it goes to all these governments. But for about 3%, these people were willing to risk everything to go to war. Well, Lincoln was trying to reinstate this system, which is what they'd fought the Revolutionary War for. He was very much in favor of this American system, which was the idea of Henry Clay, who had been mentored by he's mentored by the guy who's the chief mercantilist. He was our first Secretary of the Treasury. And why do I have so much trouble with names, Drew?
I don't know. I'm trying to help you out here.
Okay.
Madison.
He's killed in a duel with
Aaron Burr.
With Aaron Burr, yeah. And it's okay. Well, that's why we should do podcasts. So we can pause things and look it up. But anyway, it was the American system was really.
Alexander Hamilton.
Alexander
I'm
Hamilton,
sorry.
yeah.
I said
$10
Madison,
bill man.
I'm sorry. It's been a long day today, and I haven't had dinner yet.
Yeah. So Hamilton he didn't really know much about economics, yet he was our first Treasury Secretary. He was a big proponent of the central banking. Oh, happy day. Yeah. The first U.S. bank was quite a debacle. It was so unpopular that when it came up to renew its charter, it was not renewed. I can't believe that even with the power and influence that the central bank had in those days, that there wasn't a congressman or a senator who would vote for that thing to be renewed because it was so unpopular with their constituents. It was such a criminal enterprise. But they kept trying to bring that idea back. Henry Clay was a big proponent of a central bank. So was Lincoln. Lincoln thought that was really important. He consistently promoted protectionism, which is tariffs, government control of the money supply through a nationalized banking system, and that's really worked out so well for us here in the 20th century, early part of the 21st century, where we've lost almost 99% of the value of a dollar in 100 years. That's just fabulous. He was in favor of government subsidies for railroads, and of course, part of the reason for that was he was on a retainer from the railroads for about $5,000 a year as their top lawyer. In today's dollars, it's about $50,000, maybe $500,000 a year. I mean, it's huge money just as a retainer. And he was paid that much because he was worth it. He could bring them big-time protected contracts to operate their businesses without competition. He was all in favor of government subsidies for shipping and canal building. Canal building was a typical public works project of the day because water was and still is the cheapest way to move anything. If you could move it in on water, it took much less energy. It still is the cheapest way to move anything around the world is on water. And he was for subsidizing all these canals, most of which ended up bankrupting the communities and the states in which they were built because they cost way more than they ever produced in savings and efficiencies, and they were just boondoggles, as all public works projects usually are. We've talked about the magnificent Hoover Dam, which is just what another boondoggle. We've talked about all the roads and bridges and infrastructure in this country. There's a lot. Most of them were poorly built, they're poorly constructed, they're not built to last more than 30, 40 years. The length of the bond that's put out there to build them, if they were privately done, they would build them to last, because that's where they're going to start getting a return on their investment, is over the long run. But all of our stuff is crumbling and decaying and falling apart because we don't have the money to rebuild them anymore, because this centralized banking has destroyed the value of our labor and our money. But back to Lincoln. So we have this idea that we're going to this war, and it's not about ending slavery, because that could have been done for much less than they spent on the war. It's not about freeing the slaves, because Lincoln was a racist. So what was it about? Well, as someone who studies economics, I always feel that the answer is you have to follow the money. And it's right here, and that's what I just read just a little while ago about Lincoln consistently promoted protectionism, government control of money, government subsidies, but the protectionism, that was the key thing. Those tariffs that were protecting the northern industries from imports that were less expensive to produce and ship to America than they were to produce in America. He was protecting those industries because there was more votes in the North. And we have an electoral college, and even though that dilutes the power of the more populous states to somewhat, it doesn't do it enough. And those electoral votes from those populous states are very important to get reelected. So this whole thing was about Lincoln being reelected. The protectionism, he needed that to get the votes of those northern states. It was strangling the South, but he didn't care about the South because they didn't have enough electoral votes to make a difference. So he could win without them. So he just threw them under the bus, to use the present day vernacular. And so the South, and I started this off, I read this quote from John C. Calhoun. He had understood that this was coming. This was starting back he gave that speech in 1831, I believe. And Henry Clay was alive and well and working towards, he was called the Great Compromiser. All he did is compromise the truth. Henry Clay got a lot done, but all he did was destroy the foundations of liberty and freedom in this country. He's another person that is hailed as a hero in the textbooks. That he's just a scummy person. He believed in all this crony capitalism, political intrigue, that basically the roots of mercantilism, and that it made politicians into kind of a protected class. They were able to take bribes and to do stuff. It led to all this big railway scandal. We talked about that earlier on last year with Dennis Linthicum about the scandal building the Transcontinental Railroad. Same kind of thing. It always happens. It's never not happened in history. When you give all this kind of power to people, they find ways to abuse it and to steal from the taxpayer, and they do it without any conscience or guilt. Well, Lincoln, he understood this very perfectly. He was not a saint at all. He wanted to cash in on this. He was a guy that worked on a huge retainer from the railroad industry because he was very corrupt, and he used his influence to get protection for the railroads. And for that, he was paid very handsomely. And he thought that was the way things should work. To him, that was how the world should operate. Well, the South was getting screwed, and they knew it. John C. Calhoun had been talking about it for 30 years at that point, and they finally got tired of listening to the rhetoric of the northern politicians in the northern states. They knew they were never going to have the political muscle and will because of all the different compromises and the fighting over when a new state would come into the Union, whether it would be slave or free. And it looks like they were never going to be able to overcome the Mason-Dixon line, and they were never going to have because the agricultural communities, they were mainly agricultural society, would never have the population base to overcome the disadvantage they had. The only choice they had to have a future was to secede. And I don't think there was even close to a majority of people in the North that thought that they didn't have the ability to secede. I think it was probably 2-1, 3-1 thought that they did have the right to secede. And among the one that didn't think they had the right was Lincoln, because he realized without those tariffs to loot the Southern taxpayers, the federal government's budget would not be big enough for them to pay off all the cronies that they have to pay off in order to retain their power. He would not be reelected. And it was all about him getting reelected. If you don't believe me, realize that he created the state of West Virginia because he realized he could get a few more electoral votes because they would have 2 senators and a representative. And by doing it this way, this was an area of West Virginia that was likely to vote for him because he could throw them some subsidies that dealt with rail and transporting coal and things like that. They could get 3 more electoral votes by creating a new state, West Virginia, out of Virginia. So he was very much about having political power, keeping it, and using it to enhance his treasury, his own personal treasury. He used his power as a politician to maneuver the starting point for the Transcontinental Railroad into a town where he knew they were going to pick this certain town, and he made them pick this town, and he had purchased a huge tract of land there. It's still called, in this town, it's still called Lincoln Heights, and he bought it for a song. And he knew that once the railroad was announced it's going to start there, that property would go way up in value. But thankfully, he died before he was able to capitalize on that. The man was just corrupt, and he was as crooked as a dog's hind leg, and he had it coming, in my opinion. I don't believe in force and violence for an outcome, but I don't shed any tears for the loss of his life at the same time. Lincoln was a tyrant. So that's the end of my rant. We will take people that disagree with me are welcome to post messages on our Facebook page, and I'd be happy to answer them as I have time. I'm a little busy these days, so it may take me a week or two to get back to you, but I will answer each and every one of the replies that I get to this rant I had on Lincoln, and tell me what a great guy he was, and I'll tell you where you're wrong. And I would hope that anybody that believes I'm wrong would use that whatever that feelings you or emotions you have right now to write to us, and try and keep it civil. I'm not going to insult you in my reply. I'm just trying to bring the truth to people, and the truth has been hidden from us about Abraham Lincoln. He was not what they told you he was. So, Drew, do you have any words to add before the music starts?
Chuck, you sound like an anarchist or something.
I know. I know. I tell you, for all the people that think that anarchy leads to death and destruction and chaos, whatever, just tell them what that centralized government goon Lincoln did and all the chaos and destruction and loss of life he caused in the Civil War. That's the person who's a big government guy. That's what big government brings you. Anarchy is peace, harmony. You have to cooperate with people because that's in your best interest. It's just such a much better way to live.
I agree. And if you're tired of war, then give this a shot. We can change the world.
We can. And
without forcing it upon anybody.
Yeah, without assassinating anybody. We don't have to kill a president. That's not gonna. That didn't get us anywhere. We're still in the same hot water, and it just keeps getting hotter and hotter. The situation's getting worse. It's you just have to stop. You have to stop cooperating with their violent means, and that's you don't fight fire with fire. You fight it with water.
Well said.
Well, thanks, Drew. Thank you, everybody, for listening this week. Dave, keep in touch with us. It was a great update today. And we'll look forward to having Gary on maybe next week.
I'll line it up. Good night, everybody.
To break